All opinions expressed on any program are those of the producer and or persons appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of DCTV. All producers and guests appearing on programs provide information and opinions based on information they consider to be reliable. DCTV does not affirm the completeness and accuracy. All DCTV members agree to adhere to DCTV's statement of compliance and are participants in a community medium forum where they're exercising their freedom of speech.
Good evening. I'm your host, Karen Hudis. This show is a series that has been coming to you from DCTV since 2015 in a weekly program called The Network of Global Corporate Control. Today's program is called What Can We People Do to Help? Thank you to DCTV, Carmen Stanley, Program Director, Maurice Jackson, Studio Director, and Cruchet Starnes, audio and prompter. This is pre-recorded. It's in response to Joyous Awakening's question. Karen, you're such a sorely needed source of hope in these times, and thank you with all our hearts. How can we people help support you and the efforts of this movement for global monetary justice? The first thing you need to do is to get your bearings. The way to do this is to get together with a few family members and neighbors whom you know and like and plan to remain in contact with. The reason that you don't want to be a loner is because you will be vulnerable to very sophisticated weaponry that's going to make it hard for you to reason. When you operate with a group, the banking cartel's agents will not want to use this weaponry on you. Some people are more sensitive to this weaponry, and it's frequently called electromagnetic weaponry. This weaponry is very real. We discussed mind control a couple of weeks ago. One of the other reasons you want to stay in touch with your group is to help each other when you put the puzzle pieces together. That's because old certainties have turned out to be caught up in corruption, and the old systems are getting slowly and carefully cleaned up. Who is doing the cleaning up? You are, alongside other people who are also working together in small groups. This process is going to take time as the groups form and get their bearings. In the meantime, all of the military powers of the world are going to keep peace. The chances that this all happens and happens peacefully are about 90 to 95%. We know this from very accurate power transition software from the United States National War College. Then you should learn about what's going on so you can help to make informed decisions. In the beginning, we're going to concentrate on the simple exchange of currencies. Local currencies are the most important building block. We have been preparing for this turning point for a very long time, and some people have criticized us for moving too slowly. Other people are going to find this too overwhelming. I'm in the very center of the pivot because I'm the lawyer for the world's gold and other wealth, and because I vote the shares of the United States on the Board of Governors that manages the trust containing the wealth of the world. I'm also representing the beneficiaries of the trust containing the world's wealth. The fact is that somebody has to do this job, and I'm it. Everybody agrees on this, including the powers that were. How do you know this? Well, You can see that this is true because the banking cartel that issues the world's paper money and that has been trying to steal the wealth of the world keeps on asking me to let them have the assets and the 2 quadrillion in Treaty of Versailles bonds. And of course, I keep on refusing to let them have our wealth. In many of our previous segments, I described the old systems that are getting replaced. This series has documented the tug of war between the coalition that's now in charge, that is, the critical mass of people who understand, together with the world's military powers, versus the bankrupt, corrupt powers that were, the banking cartel and the Black Nobility at its center that issues paper currencies. Now I want to tell you one of the main features of our new reality. In the words of Henry Haskins, a failed trader on Wall Street, what lies behind us and what lies ahead of us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us. I have quoted Henry's words several times. I also tweeted this a couple of weeks ago, and also at the end of the segment on how the CIA tried to bribe me. What is it that lies within us? The most significant piece of this puzzle is the part describing what I recently learned about the special role of the hippocampus. Humanity possesses many hidden abilities. According to my source on the hippocampus, we are transcendent beings. In other words, we have many talents and capabilities that are going to stand us in good stead during the global currency reset. What I'm trying to say is that we, humanity, have learned over our history, and we are ready for a new way of being with each other. That is to say, most of us, and the ones who are not ready are going to be surrounded by others of us who are going to bring these people along with the rest of us. There are some of us who are trying to hold the others back. These people, trying to hide our past, have lost out. How do I know that these people have lost out? One of the very last battles was over attempts to hide the project at Moscow State University that proves our history has been deliberately falsified. YouTube kept erasing my response to a comment pointing out the Chronologia project. And this was someone whose screen name was PoppySeed84. Hey Karen, do you have an opinion on Anatoly Fomenko's work known as New Chronology? He's a mathematician that has gone great lengths to prove that our timeline is not what we're being told. He uses astronomical events as one of his main sources of proof, since they can be determined very precisely. I would love to hear your take on it. Not sure if you have ever covered it. Thanks. And that was signed PoppySeed84. And I replied to Poppyseed, and then YouTube erased it. So she reminded me of her question. And then I said and tweeted, YouTube has removed my reply, which I tweeted. And then there's a link to that. I'll tweet this again and set out my reply again. Thank you. Yes, I have learned about Anatoly Fomenko, and we have told you this. It was actually Nick Blaine who told me about Anatoly Fomenko, and it was Nick Blaine who showed us how you're supposed to get, you can read his books. I actually went and bought all 5 of them, and I've done a lot of reading. It's very, very interesting. And I would recommend you look into it. But the point of it is that what we've been told is deliberate falsehoods, deliberate lies. And about 2 years ago, when I put the link to the Chronologia project up, they took the whole project down. And then I pointed out that they had taken it down from the internet and it was put right back. So you know that there are forces at work that are trying to keep us stupid. And you could also see that from whenever I tweet things, they go and break the links. Now that's really, that backfires because people get to be very curious, and all I have to do is show that a comment was interfered with, and more people try to read it. So, and I see that the teleprompter went out, so I'll speak extemporaneously about this. The point is that whenever anybody tries to hide something, of course people get curious. And you really do have to do your homework and satisfy yourselves what the reality is. But the mainstream media has all been bought by the banking cartel. It's very easy for them to do this. They issue money, and then they bribe the politicians. All of the politicians, all of them, are corrupt. And so you should wean yourself from this. And if you have a hard time doing this, just stay tuned. There'll be people that don't want to understand that they've been duped. It's a very difficult thing to admit that your studies, your diplomas, all of that is just there to keep you stupid. It's very hard to admit that. But as we go along, people are going to learn that, yes, unfortunately, this is the case. And we have got to start figuring out what the actual situation is as opposed to what most people believe. As John F. Kennedy said, a rising tide lifts all boats. And there will be a rising tide, and it's going to take a long time before we actually figure out what the real facts are. And that's one of the things that we have to do. Whenever I start to write something in my PC, I have to rewrite it usually 2 or 3 times because the banking cartel has hacked into my PC. What this does is it really helps me because then I have to summarize and write things more clearly. So it backfires. And one of the things that I was trying to do in the teleprompter for this segment was to give you links to the Chronologia project. And I finally, I was writing this script today, in the early morning that I'm now recording this. And so I had to abandon that effort. But yes, we're going to have to go back and figure out what the actual situation is. I do want to point out that the people of the Soviet Union, 25 million of them, were killed in World War II. And the people of the United States are allies with the people of the Soviet Union. I get to be a spokesperson in order to help get us out of a tug of war with endless repetitions. I pointed this out already. This is also because humanity's center of gravity, our wealth, has accumulated, and we need to clean up the past corruption. As soon as we've decentralized sufficiently, we're going to go back and fix things to what we all have decided. And in the meantime, we're going to keep things from derailing with a minimum number of changes. We have time to fix what needs to be fixed, also because we have already had a head start in diagnosing what's been covered up from us. While the corruption was very deep, we've been diagnosing the corruption for a long time. As many people have learned, we're standing on the shoulders of some very wonderful people who have given us a head start. We've already spoken about Jose Rizal and Ferdinand Marcos, and of course, John F. Kennedy and his brother Robert. It's important for me to speak with you without using the teleprompter. I just want to mention, which I will do with screenshots in the teleprompter, some of the recent disclosures showing that we're all ready for this next phase and also showing why we need to get started now. One of the things that I talk about in the teleprompter is about climate change. I'm not talking about global warming because what we've found out is that NASA has been falsifying the data. What you find out from serious climate scientists is that we're just about ready for a mini ice age. It's going to start in the next 10 years. It's going to get cold. And there is a very good, cheap source of energy that John F. Kennedy had discovered for the United States that's using thorium. And then the Banking Cartel, which has invested in petroleum, wanted to make profit. And they also would like for humanity not to be ready for this upcoming ice age. And so that's what they're doing. They're trying to convince us with their lies that we're headed towards global warming. No, we are not headed towards global warming. We're at the very beginning of a mini ice age. And you can see that in the teleprompter that that's so. So enough of us realize that we've been lied to and that the governments are all corrupt. And I do believe that we have time. And we can certainly recover the thorium, science on thorium, and there's other cheap sources of energy so that we won't be caught flat-footed, and we're not going to, many of us aren't going to end up dying because of this mini ice age. We will be prepared. More people are in touch with what's going on. They realize that what I'm doing is I'm just I'm standing on the shoulders of people that have been diagnosing this corruption, and there's no way to put this information back in the bottle. People know that we've been lied to, and we have to figure out what's what. Now, I'm not in a position to speak authoritatively. I'm in touch with a lot of whistleblowers, but I certainly can't vouch for all of the information that I've given you on DCTV and elsewhere. It's not my job to be a librarian or an encyclopedia. I do my best, and I do believe that I'm getting some good advice, but I'm not in a position to be an authority. This is for all of humanity. What I'd like to say is that I'm embedded in humanity. I'm doing my best, but I also admit when I get things wrong. I don't have as I said, I'm not the final word on anything, and I don't pretend to be. When people send me videos right now, please don't think I'm going to watch them, because I've got my hands full. As I said, I respond now to all of the emails personally, and so I'm not going to have time to watch videos. And also because I think we've gotten far enough along in what's going on that the best use of my time is not to try to figure out what the actual truth is, because I think I've gotten most of the highlights as far as the corruption in the money goes. And let me explain that very simply. Through our history, it's been precious metals, gold and silver, that has been our money. And when the bankers started issuing money based on debt, which is what our money is right now, it was very easy for them just to print more money and to buy up the real assets with the paper that they printed, and to be in control and to bribe people that way. That's very corrupt, and we're going to get rid of that system. And the way we're going to get rid of it is very simple. The bankers issued bonds to buy gold, and those bonds, it was about $270 trillion worth of bonds. They're called Treaty of Versailles bonds. And that those bonds carried interest. Then the interest since the 1930s has compounded. And so now those bonds are worth over $2 quadrillion. That's more than country debt. That means that the bankers owe us more than we owe them. There should never be any interest paid to the bankers, because if you offset the debt against those Treaty of Versailles bonds that they owe us, we're the ones that should be collecting interest, not them. And when we issue our money based on precious metals, I don't think we're going to have any interest on that currency. And that currency is going to be minted in 2 steps. We can't just mint it directly, because we need to know what one currency is worth vis-a-vis another currency, because we're going to keep our countries for the time being. We want to have a minimum number of changes. We don't want to have conflicts. And then once we've decentralized sufficiently and learned how to make decisions, then we can decide how we want to change things. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to be sitting in the middle and trying to keep the books straight, because we don't want for this gold that we're using for our currencies to go missing, and we don't want it to be grabbed up by the elites. They're not entitled to it. So we've got to take our time and figure out good systems, and that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be working at the very center to try to do that and reporting to everybody. And because all the militaries understand that this is what everybody wants, we're going to keep peace. We're not going to get involved in conflicts. And we're going to go very slowly so that everybody's on board. And it's not going to be easy in the very beginning, because we're not going to have honest governments. And there's also going to be a lot of confusion, because these mind control weapons are still there. And I've lived with this weaponry. First of all, I've had to work myself loose. One of the best ways to work yourself loose is through music. It's like an exercise for the mind. But I've also seen what happens to people who are sensitive to it. It's like hypnosis. Some people are more susceptible than others. And when somebody's very susceptible to it, you can't get through to them. And when you try to get through to them, because they're hypnotized, they can resist. They can become very violent. So you really have to learn how not to insist with people who are just very susceptible to these mind control weapons. And we're gonna be living with maybe 80% of the people. It's like they're sleepwalking, and the rest of us we're going to have to be working for them and humoring them. The best way to work with somebody who's susceptible to mind control is just not to get involved in subjects that are contentious. Just drop them, and you have to learn. It's a matter of discipline. I just recently, a week ago, was talking to somebody that I didn't know, a total stranger, just trying to see whether they were susceptible to mind control, and they were very susceptible to it. It was as if they couldn't hear me. It was as if I was speaking a foreign language. Really, that's just what it's like. You have to develop that understanding. And we're all going to be living in a world where so many of us are just sleepwalking. It's going to be a very interesting world, and we're going to have to get used to it. But as I said, some of us have been living with this and working with it for quite some time, And it's actually a relief when you find somebody who's also been working in this situation. You compare notes, and it's really that's where we are right now. Rather than simply summarize what I've already said in this segment, I want to remind you that we are caretakers for the rest of the beings on this planet. For the benefit of all of us, especially the children, let's go to the essence of the cetacea. Learn to communicate fluently. Cetacea, those are whales and dolphins. And then the humans, dolphins and whales, can move forward together as co-species in mutual love and respect and joy, as we have done for eons before. Until next week, I'm your host, Karen Hudis.